Good afternoon. I am Saad Al-Aziz, head instructor and owner of Semper Fortis Jitsu here in San Antonio, Texas. And today's topic is rules for sparring, guidance and guidelines for when you're rolling. And in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we commonly refer to it as rolling. Other arts will call it sparring. And I'm going to explain why I have certain rules and the concept behind them. So the first thing that I want to stress is anytime you're sparring in class, is your number one priority is the safety of your training partner. More so than getting the submission or getting a dominant position or somehow, in your mind, winning the sparring match with whoever you're training with. Your number one priority is your training partner's safety. That's in my school. Other schools will have different priorities. But in my school, when you spar on these mats, I'm looking at you in your safe conduct towards your training partners. Because when two people are sparring and one of them applies the submission and the other gets injured, I almost always blame the person that applied the submission. Why is your training partner injured? Because it's never the right answer of, well, they didn't tap in time. Because you shouldn't be doing a technique if you don't know what the break point is. Like, regardless of whether that person taps. Like when I spar in here, I let go of submissions all the time because people that I'm sparring with sometimes don't realize the danger of the submission that I have them in. And so instead of proving a point to them and breaking their arm or snapping their leg, I just let go of the submission and move on to something else. Or I'll have a choke on the person and I'll see them start to daze off, and I'm like, you know what? Instead of them going to sleep, what's the point of that? I'm just going to move on with the submission because I see they're in distress. They just don't realize it. So my number one objective is your safety. I'm not interested in whether I get the tap on you or not. And it's not just your safety when you're rolling with me, but your safety when you're rolling with everybody. When you roll with people, I want you to be as concerned with their safety as you are with yours, because you need to know when you thrust your hips on an arm bar that you're going to break your training partner's arm. So slowly do it. You're not just violently thrusting into it as if you're in a street fight or an MMA fight or maybe even a tournament. Give your training partner plenty of time to tap, so they leave uninjured. Because one, check your ego at the door. And we say that a lot in jiu-jitsu, which is don't be in such a hurry to submit your training partner that you injure them just because you want to win that roll. Work on your skills, develop your skills, and do it in a safe way, because safety needs to be your number one priority in every single roll. And that's going to go into why I don't allow some techniques to be used while you roll in here, because your safety is my number one concern. And we'll talk about other schools may allow all kinds of techniques, and you'll go into tournaments, allow all kinds of techniques, but they have two things in common. They get their students to sign a waiver. It's like, yeah, we'll allow spinal cranks, we'll allow heel hooks, we'll allow everything. Well, that's great, but you can do that after you sign the waiver. And that works for these schools or these tournaments. My concern is I realize that my average student has a day job. A lot of my students work construction, they work plumbing, they do electrical work, they do, physical labor. So if they're seriously injured, they can't do their day job. And their day job is what, puts a roof over their head. It's what feeds their family. So I'm concerned that I don't want my people to get injured because I want them to be able to do their day job. And I know I have a significant amount of students who are in a financial situation where they don't have medical insurance. So if they get injured, how do they get fixed again? Not only can they not work, but I guess they're going to go through Medicaid to possibly get fixed. So I'm very concerned about injuries and about the safety of the students. And I have very little concern about when two people spar, who won the sparring match. I don't care about that. And I'll tell people all the time, it's of no concern to me if a higher belt taps to a lower belt, because you're just training. You're in here rolling, you're sparring, you're training, you're trying to get better. I am not at all concerned about the outcome of that sparring match. So I don't want my higher belts, going harder or doing dangerous techniques just to win the sparring match. It's like, no, I want you to ensure that your training partner is safe. They leave unscathed so they can go to work tomorrow, so they can provide for their family. I don't want them to leave broken. So that's why there's certain techniques that just don't allow to happen in class. And when you spar, I don't allow heel hooks. And, people will be like, well, there's heel hooks in jiu-jitsu. Sure. But you have to have rules when you spar. When two people go to spar, you're either going to agree upon a certain set of rules. And normally the standard for most schools you go to is the IBJJF rules, which they don't allow heel hooks, with the exception of black belts in no gi now. But they're not allowing heel hooks in gi. Same thing with spinal cranks. They're not allowing spinal cranks. And you're like, well, that's in jiu-jitsu. Well, you're either going to go with a rule set of trying to make the sparring match as safe as possible, or you're going to go with a no rule set. And in Brazil, they normally call it NHB, no holds barred. But in no holds barred, that means the other thing that people don't realize is they say, oh, there's heel hooks in jiu-jitsu. Sure. There's also kicks, elbows, headbutts, groin grabs. When you and I agree to roll, we're either going to agree to a rule set, of what techniques we can roll safely, or we're going to go no holds barred, which means when you fall back for a heel hook, I'm not just going to try to pry your hands off my heel. I'll kick you in the face. And then what happens? You miss the heel hook. Because even if you watch elite level competitors, at the ADCC, and these other competitions, you'll notice some of the best heel hookers in the world, and they do it in no-gi, and it's been incredibly effective. They miss a lot. They go for the heel hook, and they don't get it. Well, in a fight, or in an MMA fight, a street fight or an MMA fight, you go for your heel hook, you don't get it. A lot of times that means your opponent is now in a dominant position, and they're dropping elbows and fists into your face, which is going to change, the dynamic of going for that submission. It's one thing to go for the submission when there's no fear of strikes. It's a whole different ball game going for that submission when if you miss it, you're going to take a number of blows to the head. It's sort of like deep half guard is very popular in tournament jiu-jitsu. But say you watch UFC one weekend, and you'll notice nobody goes to deep half guard. Spider guard's very popular in tournament jiu-jitsu. Nobody in the UFC does spider guard or De La Riva guard. And very rarely will you see them go for heel hooks. And you say, well, why is that? It's so effective in tournament jiu-jitsu. Because you're going to take blows. And probably the best heel hooker in the MMA was Husmer Pajarez. And the 2 times he got knocked out were the 2 times he missed the heel hook. And his opponent came up on top, dropping bombs on his head. So realize that, yes, the heel hook is an effective technique. Yes, it's a part of jiu-jitsu. But when we roll in here, we don't do the heel hook because of the risk of injury. Other schools and other tournaments are willing to take that risk. Mind you, they're willing for you to take that risk after you've signed the waiver, the injury waiver. It's like, sure, go ahead. Heel hook each other. Or, do a spinal crank. Why don't we do spinal cranks in the IBJJF tournaments? Because if a guy doesn't tap on time, we don't want him paralyzed, being taken out on an ambulance. And same thing with heel hook. If it doesn't tap on time, I don't want your ACL, your MCL, your LCL, your meniscus all torn. Now you need major reconstructive knee surgery. And which is also why, certain submissions aren't available to people until they get to like brown belt or black belt when they compete in the IBJJF, because you need a certain experience level to identify the danger you're in. So yeah, you could go to one of these smaller local tournaments, sign your waiver, and be like, yeah, your white belt, you want to heel hook each other, you want to knee bar each other, toe hold, spinal crank, whatever you want to do, go right ahead, right after you sign this waiver. And like I said, if your goal is to be in the UFC, sure, maybe that's the type of school you want to train at. For my goal is I'm teaching people self-defense and just a lifestyle. It's like, yeah, we compete, but it's a lifestyle, where, hey, you come in 5-6 times a week, you train, and you leave safely. You leave intact. You're not leaving with a serious injury. So I try to make it as safe as possible for you to come in here and train and not leave with a serious injury. So that's why I don't allow heel hooks, and that's why I don't allow spinal cranks while you're sparring. And I also, one of the reasons we call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu the gentle art is because although it's very physical, you're really only getting injured if you don't tap to the submission on time. So there's other techniques that I don't allow people to do when they're sparring in here. Like, I don't allow people to get side control and put knee on head. If you've never seen it, it's a pretty brutal move because your head is on the mat and the person on top is driving his knee into your skull. Is that a part of jiu-jitsu? Sure, it could be a valid street fight technique, but is that something that somebody wants to come in and train and deal with every day? It's like, no, you're not here to brutalize people. We're here to use techniques to win, but we don't need to brutalize each other. Same thing, it's like, I don't want you taking your elbow inside somebody's closed guard and grinding it into their thigh so they leave with a black and blue mark just because you don't know a better way to open up the closed guard. That's why I want you to come to class. I'm going to teach you much better ways to open up the closed guard. And if you look at high-level competitors, you don't see them grinding their elbows into people's thighs to get them to open their closed guard because it's a low-level technique. It's not really a technique at all. It's just brutality. Or like, shoot, I had a guy, I almost threw him out of the school because he was rolling with a kid and he did the neon skull technique from side control. I'm like, you realize you're doing this to a 14-year-old boy? He's like, oh, I thought he was a man. I'm like, even if he was an adult, this wouldn't be acceptable. But it's even worse because he's a child and you're doing neon skull. This is horrible. Like, what are you thinking? So I realize sometimes people come to me from different schools and, techniques are allowed there. Sometimes it can be the wild, wild west depending on where that person's training. And so I wanted to create this video to sort of let people know, hey, don't do that trash in here. This isn't that kind of school. There may be schools in town that you can do all kinds of brutal techniques, and that may be the school for you. And this Semper Fortis Jiu-Jitsu may not be the school for you. But I don't want you doing that to each other. Or like, I was rolling with a guy one time, several years ago, and I was in bottom half, and I was visiting somebody else's school, and the guy on top took his elbow and he put it like right in my ear. In my ear, my head was on the mat, and he started to grind that elbow into my ear. And I kid you not, it was one of the most painful things I ever felt. It wasn't a jiu-jitsu move. It's like something you might do in a street fight, I guess. But it did cause me to move. But it wasn't even like he was trying to pass my guard. He was just just inflicting pain upon me. And as the roll progressed, I triangled him. And then I told him while he was in the triangle, I'm like, brother, you deserve to go to sleep for that trash you just did to me. But I'm going to be a better man. I'm going to let you go out of this triangle because you're going to tap now. But don't do that, people. Don't do that to people. Like, don't brutalize your training partners. Because one, they got to go to work tomorrow. Two, you want them to come back and you want them to train with you. And if you're brutalizing people, they don't want to train with you. Nobody wants to come in and be brutalized. And if they do, they're just in the wrong. Semper Fortis is not the school for you. And it's the same thing with spinal cranks. You know, like whether you're doing a can opener to try to get past somebody's closed guard, or I forgot what they call it, the twister. I think it's, you know, where you're doing the spinal crank. I don't want the consequence of somebody sparring in here to be they're paralyzed. You know, I need to call an ambulance because you've paralyzed somebody. You know, so that's why I don't allow those spinal cranks in here. And you know, the heel hook, I don't allow it because it's a serious injury, and I don't want people leaving my class needing, you know, knee reconstruction. You know, so, and please, you know, I mentioned earlier that you notice that if you watch the UFC, you don't see people going for heel hooks. You know, I can only think of like two guys that really have had success with a lot of heel hooks in the UFC, which was Husmer Pajarez and Ryan Hall. But like I said, the two times Pajarez lost, he got knocked out going for heel hooks because he missed. And I'll try to find the link and include it below of a YouTube video in where it was a Sambo match a few years ago between two Russian Sambo practitioners. And one guy, he broke the other guy's leg. Like his knee, he attacked his knee, and his knee was, so his leg was pointing out at a direction it wasn't supposed to point. It was totally destroyed. But the guy whose leg was destroyed, he took that injury, went to the other guy's back, put a rear naked choke on him, and forced the guy to tap. So realize that when you heel hook somebody, you haven't ended their ability to injure you. You know, like those leg attacks, although they're very effective in no-gi sport competitions, if you do a leg attack in a fight or an MMA fight, the consequence is you haven't eliminated that person's ability to do damage to you. So in this Sambo match, hopefully I can find the video. I'll include a link to it in the comments below, to where you can look at it, and where the guy, he's got it, clearly he's going to need knee reconstruction, because after he choked the guy out and won the match, he couldn't stand up, you know, so had his opponent just tore his leg up and got up and ran, you know, the person couldn't have followed him. But the fight continued. So tearing somebody's leg up does not stop their ability to continue to attack you. The most effective thing to stop somebody's ability to continue to attack you is to choke them unconscious. You know, if you're in a real fight or an MMA fight, you choke them unconscious, they're not attacking you no more. Now we're done. If you break a joint, you know, like especially the leg, they can continue to fight. And you know, like they still have the use of both their arms, their head, you know, like they can continue to fight. Like the Sambo video that I'll include, you know, he went ahead and choked him out. You know, he's going to need knee reconstruction, but you know, he won that match. So it's not like you're going to do these heel hooks and it's going to be such a decisive move that you're going to win a street fight. It's a high risk, high reward. The risk is if you miss it, you're going to pay and you're going to eat some punches and kicks. And you know, the reward is if you hit it, then you know the guy, you know, his leg is devastated, but he'll be able to continue to fight and still continue to inflict damage on you. So you might hit it and then still, you know, end up losing the fight. So it's not a guaranteed win. Whereas you lock a choke on somebody, guaranteed win, because when they lose consciousness, okay, they're done fighting and you can leave the scene at that point. So safety first. And I want to stress that whether you're like, I know some people, they love to watch YouTube videos on a new technique. You make sure that when you learn a new submission, that you run it by one of the black belts in here, so you understand the consequence of that decision. It's like, well, you know what? I applied the submission, and I think if I just continue to turn the joint this way, I think this will work. It may very well work, but I want you to know before you do that to one of our fellow students, the consequence to that student. Like, I'm okay with you taking the joint to a safe level where they have an opportunity to tap and they're leaving uninjured. I'm not okay with you breaking their arm or breaking their leg or breaking their neck, because you applied a submission and you really wanted to win and you didn't know the consequence to your training partner, or you didn't fully understand the consequence to your training partner when you took it past the point of no return. They didn't tap on time, or they didn't realize what they was in, and now you've caused a serious injury to this person. So it goes back to the original motto, is when you spar with somebody in here, your training partner's safety needs to be your number one concern. Not, I want to get the tap. That way my ego feels really good. I tapped out this person. I really dominated. I feel great about myself. That can't be your number one objective. Your number one objective is, I want to make sure my training partner is going to leave intact, uninjured, and we're going to, train some more tomorrow. And if my training partner gets the best of me today, good. Let me think about what I need to do tomorrow, but I don't need to come back with some brutal, dangerous technique, to hurt my training partner. Sort of like if you're rolling with somebody and you're on the edge of the mat, you don't do the sweep and throw them off onto the concrete floor. It's like, let's go ahead and reset. That way I can do my sweep in a safer place in this mat, but I'm not trying to injure you, Or if I'm doing takedowns, and you're by the wall and the chairs, I don't go for the double leg and drive you into the walls and the chairs. It's like, well, I got the takedown. Oh, that's great, but now, you've injured your training partner and possibly yourself, driving them off the mats. So goes back to the concept of leaving your ego at the door. Don't be so caught up in trying to win a sparring match that is just a training session. This isn't, battle royal. We're in a training session, and I want you and your training partner to leave uninjured and leave safely. No one cares, who taps who. Leave safely. So that's all I'm gonna say on that. If you're in doubt on a technique, talk to one of the black belts in here about, hey, is this a safe thing to do? And, I want to understand this submission. And so the ideal submissions I want to see you doing are the submissions that the instructors here teach you, because I don't know what people put on YouTube. They could put all kinds of craziness, and some of the techniques may work, they may not work, but in addition to understanding whether they work or not, you need to understand what the break point is on your training partner if your training partner doesn't tap on time. So if I'm learning a new submission off some video I watched, I need to know when I've taken this submission beyond the point of no return where my training partner is now injured. And your goal needs to be, don't injure your training partner. Sometimes injuries are going to happen because we're doing a combat sport here. So injuries will happen from time to time. But if you're out here training and your training partners are consistently being injured by things that you're doing something wrong. Like that's not the norm. I've been training Jiu-Jitsu for, 15, 16 years, and I can't think of one time where I was training where my training partner ever was seriously injured. Like, I think the worst injury I've ever had with a training partner is, like they popped a rib trying to bridge and throw me off of them, which was sort of self-inflicted, but, I still feel bad that, the guy hurt himself, I've never had a training partner where I just locked on a submission and broke them. It's like, no, because I understand what the submission does. And that's what you need to understand as a martial artist, is what does this submission do that I'm applying to this person? And I don't want them to be injured. So keep keep that in mind when you're training. You're not here to brutalize people. You're not here to hurt people. You're here to learn jiu-jitsu and to practice it in a safe way. Because you're either going to train with rules, and the general guidelines we go with is IBJJF rules, or you're going to do a no holds barred training session. And if you're doing no holds barred, then that's everything in jiu-jitsu, not just heel hooks and spinal cranks, but we're talking about, we're going to do knees to the face, we're going to do elbows to the head, punches, kicks, it's all out, headbutts. But who's going to agree to that? I'm not. Like, they could do a local tournament and allow no holds barred, but I ain't entering that tournament. I'm 52 years old. I have no desire to be kicked and punched or elbowed in the head. So try to go with a training rule set that will keep everybody safe. Like I said, injuries are going to happen, but we want to try to be as safe as possible. And that's why we have these certain rules in effect, that I don't want to see you going for heel hooks. I don't want to see you doing spinal cranks. I don't want to see you grinding your elbow into somebody's face. I don't want to see you, riding your knee on somebody's head with all your weight. Like, oh, I bet that hurts. Well, he could tap. Yeah, he could. Or you could just do some, decent jiu-jitsu techniques and be a good training partner and not try to just inflict pain upon them. So that's what I want. Train safely for everybody, so everybody can come back tomorrow and train again. And I want people to leave here and be able to go to their day jobs and continue to do their work and continue to provide for their families. It's a different situation. Like if you're in, say, a school where, like, hey, we're trying to produce UFC champions. Well, maybe, there's going to be a different rule set there. But for us, I don't have an MMA program. I'm not trying to produce any UFC champions. I'm preparing people for street fights. I'm preparing people for sport competitions. I'm preparing people just for everyday life, conditioning, enjoyment, self-defense, but we're not trying to get ready for some big MMA match. Different schools, different objectives. Want to focus on everybody's safety. All right. I have run this video way too long, but I hope I got my point across. All right. Any questions for next week? Write them down below. We'd love to hear from you. And any comments on the video, anything that you don't understand, feel free to fire away. But this is something I'm going to start having people watch before they roll in class here, because I want people to know what the rules are. All right. Thanks again. Ciao.